you need.
I am here with Mr. Adam Fitzgerald once again. How are you
Hey,
doing,
what's
buddy?
up, Tommy? How you doing, pal?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. A little tired. It's been a long week, but
Me
we're
and you
gonna
both.
yeah. Well, my week's not been as long as yours. Definitely not for the same reasons.
No, I know. I know.
But yeah, but we're both fighting through it and getting on with our lives, right? That's all we can do.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting stuff about what we're covering is just as tumultuous as our daily lives, but just not as covered up and conspiracy hidden. But the Hamburg cell is definitely a very broad topic. As you know, as we covered before in our previous audio, it seems a little bit more central, a little bit more insular regarding Khalid al-Mihdhar and Wafa Hazmi. Hamburg cell could lead into a much bigger conspiracy regarding 9/11. There's a lot of mystery and intrigue regarding this group, and it basically is central to 9/11 itself
Mm.
because of the players involved. And these are all the pilots involved with the hijacking of planes. Were Khalid al-Mihdhar and Wafa Hazmi, even though they were supposed to be pilots for 77, unfortunately for them, they didn't take their English classes. And because they couldn't speak English, someone had to take over the flight duties for 77 there. And so they were regulated to be muscle hijackers. But these guys that we're going to talk about today, uh, there's a lot of mystery behind two of these people, and we could get into that today as well.
I'm looking forward to it. I don't know a whole lot about Hamburg. I know that a lot of the planning for the hijacking and the attack did take place in Germany. I didn't even know exactly where. I just knew it was in Germany. And that these guys, what strikes me the most about all of this, like as you start digging into this, people have this impression that the attacks on 9/11 were carried out by these kind of like ignorant people that they weren't cultured. They had no influenced by the outside world. They weren't, experiencing the world. And these guys are well traveled. They're all over the place. They're going
Mm.
everywhere, and it's just crazy.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception happening regarding like these people couldn't have done what they did. Now, regarding the muscle hijackers, all they had to do was hold back the pastors from revolting and fighting back. The power hijackers had to be a lot more educated, and they were given a lot more responsibility. Now, if we're going to believe the words of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, take this with a grain of salt because he was tortured. The reason why these guys were selected was because they were educated and they actually could fit in because they were actually went to university. Muhammad Atta went to University of Applied Sciences. Ziad Jarrah actually went to University of Greifswald, where he took up electrical engineering, aeronautical engineering as well. So you have a lot of these guys that basically come from a very uh, moderate background. A lot of these guys basically also in the Hamburg cell were very religious, and we're going to talk about that because that's important. Because it leads into the state narrative that these guys were highly religious and they were ultra orthodox in their beliefs. And it's the reason why they attacked us. Hopefully, when we get around to talking about the background of some of these people, that you'll finally understand that has nothing to do with religion whatsoever. But yeah, I hear this from time to time, Tommy, regarding these guys are basically dumb. They come from these very remote areas of Saudi Arabia. Yeah, that's the case with the muscle hijackers, but also at the same time, these pilot hijackers, they definitely were very educated.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to getting into this. I don't know how you keep up with all these names. I can barely remember that. I can barely remember the names of my kids, and I'm like, wait, who?
Yeah, I can't believe it myself. Like I'll forget. I'm a concierge security guard, and I have a hard time remembering simple names like Bill and Jim. But I can remember Ramzi Ben Al Sheeb and Walid Ben Atash and all these names. and I get fun. I get picked on for it because people say, "Well, how do you remember these Arab names, but you can't remember like simple things?" I'm like, well, for one, it was a good point raised by somebody who said, the subject matter at hand really matters to you, and focus on it. I said, yeah, it's true, and maybe that's the reason why.
Mm,
Because I spend such a large amount of my time researching and reading, documents and files that are pertaining to these people and the history thereof. So yeah, it's funny because Arabic names are pretty hard to mention and speak. Like some of these names are really long, but yeah, that's the reason why is because I'm so invested in it.
mm, yeah. Well, you make him sound easy.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
like,
but
wait,
like
wait. This guy's whiter than me, and he just pronounced that like he speaks the language.
I'm very rudimental when it comes to Arabic, so I can only remember several words. That's it.
All right. So how did the Hamburg cell come together? What happened there?
Yeah, well, I mean, all right. If we, I was wondering how could I start off, like, how can I explain um, the formation of the Hamburg cell in a way that's relatable to your audience? And I
Mm,
figured that if I could give you a decent background explanation of certain people, maybe that'll make some sense. So, with the first person I'll mention is Ziad Jarrah. Ziad Jarrah is allegedly the pilot hijacker of Flight 93, United Airlines Flight 93 that crashed in Shanksville. Well, Ziad Jarrah was actually born in Beirut, Lebanon in 1975. He comes, excuse me, he came from a very modest family, secular background, grew up with no religious training whatsoever, went to a very prestigious school in Lebanon called the Mar Elas Batina School, which is located in a beachfront called Wata El Masbayef. It's a very expensive co-educational private school. He was friends with Jews and Christians actually there. And as he grew up, he was a womanizer, liked to party, and he actually moved from Lebanon to Germany in 1996 with his cousin Salim, and actually went to the University of Greifswald, where he applied for aeronautical engineering. Incidentally enough, when he was growing up, he wanted to be a pilot. And his father actually discouraged him because he was worried that he might crash into something. So that's actually true. I didn't make that up. So he actually, when he lived in Germany, he rented a room from a woman and actually lived alone in the room. And she actually drew a painting of him and he took it with him. This was in April of 1996, where he moved to Greifswald in Germany. In a matter of weeks, he became friends with an associate in the ultra Orthodox community. His name was Abdul Rahman al Makdadi, who was actually an associate for the group Hamas, which is a Palestinian Islamic organization, very ultra Orthodox, Wahhabi oriented. Um, and Makdadi actually introduced him to a mosque in Greifswald. Well, later on, when he actually found another mosque in another part of Germany in Hamburg, this mosque was called Al Quds. Al Quds Mosque in Hamburg was considered the most radical mosque in all of Germany. And this basically was headed by an imam called um, I'm drawing a blank, um, Muhammad al Fazizi. That's his name. And Fazizi actually was known for his very anti-Western vitriol. Every Friday night, he would hold like these hourly private meetings with those who were much more radical, who stood behind and learned from Fazizi about Wahhabism and their vitriol toward the West, how the West is basically detrimental to foreign policy for the Muslims, the Palestinian problem in Israel, and how the United States are friendly with Israel. And so a lot of these people that stood behind were considered the most radical members. Another person who actually frequented the mosque was Ramzi bin al-Shib. Ramzi bin al-Shib grew up in Yemen. He came from a very broken home and family. A lot of his youth information is mysterious. There's not much to be known about Ramzi bin al-Shib growing up. What we do know is that he applied for asylum in Germany in 1995, where he was awaiting for asylum. He traveled to Bosnia in 1996, fighting against the communist regime in the Balkans. Al Qaeda affiliates were actually fighting alongside here. It's alleged that Ramzi bin Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Nawaf al Hazmi also fought in the Balkans as well during the same period. Whether bin al Shib met with them, it's not known. What is known is that when he returned from Bosnia, he went to Germany, and he applied at the University of Hamburg and studied there, and basically got familiar with the Al-Quds Mosque himself. Another person who is situated with the Hamburg cell was Muhammad El Amir El Sayed Atta, otherwise known as Muhammad Atta. He came of a very prominent background in Germany. His father was a lawyer, his mother was a teacher. And basically, he was an average student in Germany. And it's also alleged that when he was growing up in his teens, he actually applied for a Muslim Brotherhood affiliate when he was growing up. And this affiliate was involved with architecture, which was basically an engineering syndicate affiliate with the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, which is the oldest and the first Muslim Brotherhood in the Arab world, which was created by Hassan al-Banna in 1932, I believe. I could be wrong about the year, give or take a year. Muhammad Atta actually his father invited German teachers into his house. He knew about these people, and they actually persuaded Muhammad Atta to apply for the universities in Germany, in which he basically did. He traveled to Hamburg, Germany, and he got himself situated with a university there, and actually got situated with the Al-Quds Mosque in 1995. And other people like Marwan al-Shehi, Saeed Bahaji, Munir al-Multasek. These are all people that stood behind and commiserated with people like Ziad Jarrah, Marwan al-Shehi, Ramzi bin al-Shib, and excuse me. While they were in this mosque over the last couple of years, in 1996, Muhammad Atta grew a beard. He himself also wasn't very religious growing up. I forgot to mention that. He wasn't very religious. But when he got to this mosque, he basically became, I guess, infatuated with this anti-vitriolic Wahhabi ideology, just like Marwan al-Shehi did, who basically did have a religious upbringing, but he wasn't a radical fundamentalist growing up. It wasn't until that he got to this mosque that he became familiar with Wahhabism, started learning about the teachings of Muhammad al-Fazizi, and basically became part of this group it became known as Hamburg Cell, because the mosque was located in Hamburg, Germany. Also, right about 1995, 96, we started learning about certain individuals. Now, these individuals are going to play a very key part in helping facilitate these young minds into becoming radicalized. And a lot of these people basically weren't German citizens. They actually grew up in Syria. And these are people that you probably never heard of before, because the media doesn't really mention them, but they're very important. One of them is Mohammed Haydar Zamar, who is of Syrian origin. He grew up born in Aleppo, Syria. He was an Al-Qaeda recruiter, and he was a money launderer and a gun runner. And another was a Syrian businessman, legitimate businessman, who actually grew up in Syria, was born in Syria, and then became a German businessman, where he had a lot of businesses in Germany. His name was Marmoon Darkanzali. Also, a money launderer, had Al-Qaeda contacts in Afghanistan, became quite familiar with even the oldest leadership of Al-Qaeda, people like Mahmoud Salim, Abu Hiraj al-Iraqi. These are people who are the first and foremost individuals who created Al-Qaeda while they were in Sudan in 1992 when they were first making it. And they had bank accounts. Mahmoud Salim shared a bank account with with Marmoon Dar Ghazali. And later on, much later on, I just want to mention it now before I forget it. Much later on, after 9/11, when the FBI started investigating the backgrounds of financial transactions of these people, it was later found out that Marmoon Dar Ghazali inherited a bank account of one of the 9/11 hijackers, and it's alleged to have been Muhammad Atta. This bank account was shared with none other than Mahmoud Salim, one of the founders of Al Qaeda in 1992 in Sudan. So, incidentally enough, these 9/11 hijackers who had no use for bank accounts anymore transferred over to these people. What I'm trying to show you is there's a direct connection with Al Qaeda to these people who hijacked the planes. Also, too, Mohammed Haydar Zamar and Marmoon Dar Ghazali, even though that they themselves weren't very religious, but they were more of a criminal minded. They have a very syndicate minded background. And these people basically were known to the German intelligence services, known as the BFV, the LFV. And these are long names. And I don't want to butcher names, so I'm just going to keep it short as the BFV and the LFV. They're involved with signals intelligence as well as human intelligence. And they knew about the mosque for years because they knew about them in the early 90s when they started preaching this anti-vitriolic, anti-Western diatribe. And then when 1996, when they were becoming situated with intelligence operations involving people like Mohammed Al-Fazizi, Mahmoud Dar Ghazali, and Mohammed Haydar Zamar, they found out that this network started to grow when the Hamburg cell suddenly became at the forefront of German intelligence. Now, at the same time, about a couple of years later, in 1999, the CIA became involved. And it's not known when they became involved regarding the intelligence services. But if I had to guess, now this is speculation, so be careful. I'm only take this with a grain of salt. If we're to believe that the NSA were listening to the phone calls of the Yemen hub, and which I mentioned before in previous audios with you, Tommy, the NSA could basically warn the CIA, say, hey, listen, we know about a phone call between Mohammed Haydar Zamar and, say, Mohammed Marwan al-Shehi, who was allegedly the pilot hijacker of United Airlines Flight 175. And actually, this phone call did take place, and the CIA was well aware of it. Later on, Michael Scheuer, the head of Alex Station, the chief of station of Alex Station, basically said that these phone calls were known to German intelligence as well as the CIA. And then later on, when the CIA knew about these people, they basically tried to turn Marmoon Dar Ghazali and Mohammed Haydar Zamar into CIA informants. Now, it's alleged between them that they turned them down, but that's what we heard about Ali Muhammad, who basically became a triple spy for the CIA, the FBI, and Osama bin Laden, as well as Omar Abdul Rahman of the Egyptian radical sect Gamma Islamiyah, who had links with the World Trade Center bombers and also the Landmarks bombing plot. And then you have Israeli intelligence. So basically, I don't know what level they had in Germany, but I could tell you what they had in America. But we don't know about the level of information that they had abroad. It's very little. So I really won't talk about that much because it's very nondescript right now. But maybe hopefully in time, as we look into deeper intelligence ties to Israeli intelligence and the Hamburg cell, maybe we can get a bigger portion. Now, later on, when we talk about Ziad Jarrah, I'm definitely going to bring up what could be a huge Israeli intelligence operation involving Ziad Jarrah, but I'll get to that much later. So we have now domestic intelligence. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask a couple of questions? Sure. Because there are some things that I'm just kind of I'm curious about. All right. So we anybody who's read Scott Horton's books or dug in any to the Iraq and Afghanistan involvement in Al Qaeda, we always kind of view them as only Sunni. Now, Wahhabi is something I've heard quite a bit. Now, I've never had it like really defined for me, but you brought up Hamas earlier, and Hamas, if I'm not mistaken, is more Shia. Am I correct?
No, that's Sunni Islam.
Oh, Hamas is also Sunni.
Yeah, Hezbollah is Shia, and they sometimes
Hezbollah.
they get,
Okay,
yeah,
okay,
Hezbollah
that
is
was my mistake.
Lebanon. They're from Lebanon.
Right. Okay. 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 So, all right. So my next question, excuse me. My next question would be, what do you think was attracting these non-fundamentalists to this mosque? Like, how were they getting drawn into this more fundamentalist aspect?
Yeah, this is actually this is a fantastic question.
Oh, and by the way, just to let you know, I'm muting my mic while you're speaking because there's this echo I'm hearing in my headphones, and I just don't want
Oh, are
it to come
you?
through on the recording. Yeah, so
Okay.
I'm muting my mic while you're chatting. Now I can't hear you at all right now. No, nothing.
Really?
There we go. I can hear you now. I'll just mute my mic. It's not a big deal.
Okay.
But that's why I was just shaking my head and making facial like
Oh wow. Okay,
facial
I'm
expressions
sorry.
and not saying anything a while ago because I was like,
I'm slow.
no, it's okay. There's just a slight echo and it's bothering me while I'm listening. And I'm like, I don't want it to bother my listeners. So,
Oh, you know what? I know exactly what it is. Can you hear me now?
yes,
Okay. Is there an echo?
no.
No. I know what happened.
Okay.
I took out my headphones so I could because I didn't want to wear the headphones, but I don't care. I'll wear the headphones this way you don't get an echo.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I
Yeah.
had the speaker on. I had the speaker on. That's
Oh,
why.
okay. Yeah, because there was like this like little like injection
Was it
whenever I
there?
would like nod or like
Right.
reply. I was like, oh, I'm gonna go ahead and mute and just kind of
Oh, I
let
have
the
to apologize. I'm sorry that that happened. So
no, no worries.
my
No
fault.
worries. So all right, go
Yeah.
ahead. So the what was attracting these non-fundamentalists to this mosque? Like it seems odd to me that they would be attracted to
Yeah.
like such a fundamentalist mosque when they had no interest or had shown no interest in the past of being interested in this.
Yeah, it's such an awesome question, by the way, Ty. Yeah, I love this question because this is exactly what's the essence of the case, right? What brought people like Ziad Jarrah with no religious training, no background, into such a fervent, radical militant mindset, right? Why did
Mhm.
Muhammad Atta, seemingly, educated, go to this mosque when he had no like really religious training? What brought them there, and why did they stay there? And that's a great question. So I really have no real answer for that because if we actually really had an answer to that, well, if we listen, for example, if we listen to the State Department narrative of, oh, they just got brainwashed because they went there, but that doesn't tell you anything. Why did they go there initially? And then listen to what they had to say. Was it impressionable? Did they really have like a connection to the plight of the Muslims regarding what the United States is doing? That's actually a feasible reason.
Yeah.
But what doesn't resonate with me is that you know, especially with Ziad Jarrah, because Ziad Jarrah grew up as a secularist. And to go into those, I can understand if it was a gradual process. No, he went right to the most radical mosque in Germany. And while he was there, he was like being helped along by these individuals like Muhammad al-Makisi. And later on, there was another individual, Marcel K. That's all we know about. His name was His name was Marcel K. And he met him in Westphal in Germany and he was basically an important individual, basically because even in the weeks prior to 9/11, the days prior to 9/11, he actually called him in Germany. He was the only person that kept in contact while he was in the U.S. that he kept in Germany. I don't know why. And there's not much information out there about this guy, Marcel K. In fact, Paul Thompson and the History Commons timeline is the only timeline that magically mentions this, along with the German publication Der Spiegel. And basically, he only calls him with something really like there's a problem arising or he needs help with something. And, we don't know to the level of extent that he's getting help from. And there's, like I said, with Ziad Jarrah, there's so much mystery there, but it could be potentially the big case involved with Israeli intelligence. I'm going to get to that in a minute.
Mm.
But yeah, I really couldn't give your question any justice because even I don't know why. Because that's what bothers me is like, why did these young guys basically go to this mosque other than to basically reaffirm that their hatred for the United States and Israel regarding what they're doing to the Arab world? That I can understand a little bit, but to stay there and basically stay there for like a year or two, they stood there for a couple of like I think it's approximately 16 months, and basically become manipulated by these people. Could that have been the case? Yeah, very well could have been. But I think there's something more to it, but we just don't know for sure because later on, the German BFV, the domestic arm of Germany, German intelligence, they basically said this that after 9/11, they were interviewed by Der Spiegel, right? So they basically said that um, the FBI's insistence that Ziad Jarrah, Mohammed Atta were affiliated with the Hamburg cell is that the FBI said they were, but we found no evidence that Ziad Jarrah was a member. And so when I heard about that, I was like, well, that's really interesting because they only found one item that basically showed that Ziad Jarrah was even remotely known to these people. And
Mm.
that was a photograph of this wedding that took place, I think it was in 1999, of one of the Hamburg cell members, Saeed Bahaji. He got married, and Ziad Jarrah is actually in the photo, and this photo is actually known. It was released to the public. But that's the only evidence that the BFE had. In fact, and they, who else would know more about them? I'm not going to say the FBI knew because they don't do investigations in a foreign land. So the BFB was, monitoring this Hamburg, this Al Quds Mosque for years,
Mm.
and they basically said later on that there was very few, if no evidence whatsoever, that Ziad Jarrah or Ziad Jarrah was a part of this cell. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. A lot of this is going to make sense when I build up the case for what I think is going on here.
Mm.
But during the years of '99, Mohammed Atta, Marwan al Shehi, and Ramzi bin al Shib, they actually moved into an apartment, which is the address was 54 Marion Straub. And they basically lived in this apartment and helping them into this apartment, getting situated with Mohammed Haydar Zamar. So this link between Al Quds, Al Qaeda, and the Hamburg cell is a straight, like no wavering. There's no break. They're always there together. They're doing stuff together. Like in other words, if we're to believe that Mohammed Haydar Zamar may have been like intelligence asset somehow, that he did become a CIA asset. We don't know, but maybe if he did, like Ali Muhammad did, he's making sure that this group follows along and stuff like that. That very well could be a reasonable explanation, but we don't know for sure. But anyway, it just seemed that the intelligence services, foreign intelligence, they were all with them every step of the way. In fact, they actually were monitoring the house, keeping a close eye who's coming in and out of the house. The CIA was listening to the cell phone calls of Marwan al Shehi and Mohammed Haydar Zamar. They tried to flip Mahmoud Darkazali, Mohammed Haydar Zamar as well. So there's a lot going on here. And basically, by the year 1999, more and more reports are coming out that the CIA now grew their intelligence, not just with Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, but also now to the members of the Hamburg cell. Now, was that information basically shared with members of the FBI State Department? Well, no, because they didn't even know that was going on. And not to mention, they had no idea about what's going on even in the United States itself. So if the CIA is not helping the FBI and the State Department regarding what was happening inside the United States, well, they're certainly not going to help the United States about what's going outside of it. And that's the CIA's jurisdiction.
Right.
So they're not sharing any information. Also, at the same time, the NSA is also not sharing information with the CIA because they're not sharing all their transcriptions and their bulletins with the CIA regarding monitoring the cell phones of certain people on the house phone in Yemen. So there's a lot. It's not like what the State Department says later on after 9/11. What the heads of intelligence also say. Well, we just didn't have the information that could have prevented it. No, what I'm telling you, and this is a matter of public record, they were awash in it. Now, what they could say, and this is what the NSA said later, that they just didn't have the manpower to transcribe the data, to act on it. But later on, that wasn't the case either, because what case is more important than this? This is the biggest case in the whole world at the time. We didn't have much in the way of like, you know, international terrorism from somebody else. This was the prime man, Osama bin Laden, and Al Qaeda. So, like the heads of all the intelligence services are concentrating on this issue.
Well,
In fact,
yeah, you would think too. I mean, it just common sense tells me that if I were, let's say, in the NSA or in the CIA or DIA, any of these things, and I were to come forward to in congressional testimony, before the intelligence community and be like, hey, look, the same people that carried out 1993 World Trade Center bombing are planning something bigger. And we have intelligence that suggests that they are going to be attacking not only the World Trade Center, but other targets within the United States. We need more manpower. The way they throw away around money into the Defense Department, and you would think they would find, out of the $1.7 trillion they spend every fucking year on defense, you would think they could find a dime to put towards investigating and more manpower to investigate the intelligence they had. This is why people get caught up in the conspiracy theories that the United States, if nothing else, if they weren't directly involved, they were at least complicit because they didn't take action. This is why you get that idea, because people are so frustrated. It's like, I'm an outsider looking in at what you had at this time, and I can tell you that if I would have gone in front of the Senate or the House and brought forward this intelligence and said, we need more funding, we need more manpower, we need this, you would have gotten it. You know what I'm saying? And so people get really caught up in that. And I understand the frustration when you look at it.
Yeah, look, everything you said was actually correct, because what I'm telling you up until this point, and there's a lot more, and I'm going to add to it. Like, you basically got to sit back. Even the layman regarding 9/11 is basically saying, "Oh wow, it almost sounds like they wanted this to happen, because they were right lock in step with these people."
Right.
And I'm not just talking about, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi just inside the United States. I'm talking about these people in the Hamburg cell, even in Germany. Yeah, and we're talking about years prior to 9/11. 5 years prior. I'm giving you a timeline to where I'm giving you that space to where it wasn't like they knew 9/11. They found out late about 9/11. They couldn't act on it. No, that they could have acted on it. Absolutely, they could have. And that this goes back many years prior. And, I'll give you one example of how close these people were. There's a CIA liaison officer by the name of Thomas Volz, Volz, who works out of the Hamburg office. And basically, he appeared at the headquarters of the Hamburg State Domestic Intelligence Agency called the LFV. I mentioned the BFE, the LFV. And he's basically responsible for tracking terrorists and domestic extremists, just like the LFV. And he's the one who basically approached Mahmoud Darghazali. And because he said that, he thinks that Darghazali, up to that point, basically knows about unspecified terrorist plots, because he's speaking with those previously before, and basically built a rapport with them. He just didn't commit to being a CI1, which is a confidential informant, high echelon informant for the CIA. I don't know if he did or not, because according to the Chicago Tribune, in an article dated November 17, 2002, efforts to recruit Mahmoud Darghazali began in the spring of 97, but the CIA didn't admit that that the interest either waned or he grew as an informant. So in other words, they neither confirmed nor denied the fact. Well, if he didn't become an informant, they basically say he didn't become an informant. But because they can't deny the fact, because he most likely was. And if you want to look deeper in the roots, I won't do it here because it takes too much time. You look deeper into the roots of Syrian criminal brotherhood regarding their connections to people like Abu Nidal organization, which is an older, Arab fundamentalist organization that probably gave birth to these Arab fundamentalists of the future. There's a connection between the Syrian criminal organizations that people like Muammar Ghazali, Mohammed Azamar belong to, and also to Al-Qaeda affiliates later on. As you can see, there is a direct connection between these older groups and these newer groups that just take on a religious aspect to it. But in 1999, it's alleged by the state that an individual named Mohammed Al-Slahi basically went to the leaders of the Hamburg cell, Muhammad Atta, Ramzi bin al-Shibh, Marwan al-Shayhi, and Ziad Jarrah, and persuaded them to go to Afghanistan because these guys wanted to join the jihad in Chechnya. And that's coming from the FBI and the LFV, the German intelligence domestic spyware agency. They basically said that they found out that these guys wanted to join an Islamic jihad, to fight against, the enemies of Islam. So they were going to go to Chechnya. But somehow the state basically said, no, it was Slahi that persuaded them to go to Afghanistan and basically meet with bin Laden and Al-Qaeda there. Now, this story falls apart. Why? Because they arrested Mohammed al-Slahi later on after 9/11. Yemeni authorities turned him over to the CIA. The CIA basically tortured the living crap out of him for years. He basically was held at Guantanamo Bay without charge for 16 of those years, and he was just released. They made a film called The Mauritanian, which is excellent. I advise everybody to watch that film. It talks about the background and the life of Mohammed al-Slahi. And every charge that they made about him, even the 9/11 Commission report basically said he was the conduit that persuaded this. Well, guess what? That wasn't the case. That story never existed. He never was a liaison officer for Al-Qaeda. He never persuaded the Hamburg cell to go to Afghanistan. So that's one big hole in the story. And basically, how did they get to Afghanistan? Well, we don't know now because there's no information showing that they had a facilitator that told them to go to Afghanistan. But they did go to Afghanistan because we have video of it. So, but who got them there? That's the question, right? Well, in 1999, they go to Afghanistan and they stay in a safe house. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it just popped in my head. Were any of these people that were involved at this mosque that were involved in the Hamburger cell, were any of them familiar with bin Laden, had met bin Laden prior to going to Afghanistan?
No, none of them did. Neither Mohammed Atta, Marwan al-Shayhi, Ramzi bin al-Shibh, and Ziad Jarrah, none of them were Al-Qaeda affiliates except for Ramzi bin al-Shibh. He was. But the younger guys, like Ziad Jarrah, al-Shayhi, and Atta, they knew about bin Laden, but they were shown videos of it, but they never met him.
What? Okay, but wasn't Khalid Sheikh Mohammed involved with the Hamburg cell?
Yes, he was.
And so could that be the link that brought them into the Afghanistan?
Right, but according to Khalid Sheikh, now again, take this a grain of salt.
I don't know if I'm going to believe this guy.
Right. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed basically says that no, he wasn't.
Okay.
That he met them in Afghanistan, but then later on, well, I'll tell you the story. So they go to Afghanistan.
Okay.
In 99. We do know they do go to Afghanistan.
Right.
So they go to Afghanistan. They stay at a safe house, right? So in other words, Al-Qaeda is doing security background checks on Ziad Jarrah, Mohammed Atta, Mohammed al-Shayhi. So they stay there. And then afterwards, I guess they pass their security checks, whatever security that they go through. And not only do they meet with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who is at this point not affiliated with Al-Qaeda, remember. He doesn't join Al-Qaeda until 2001, where he joins Al-Qaeda because he doesn't.
But he was still like bros with bin Laden, right? They were close, at least in a business sense.
In a business sense, he actually was an independent contractor.
Right. Yeah, he was he was still involved with bin Laden, whether he was officially Al Qaeda or not. He did have links with bin Laden.
Well, he had links with like Baluchi terrorists, like his uncle, like his nephew is Ramzi Youssef.
So
And
you
he
think maybe he was more of a gangster kind of?
hard question, right? What was he? He wasn't a religious fundamentalist, that's for sure. I mean, he's a Wahhabi, but they're not really like pious Muslims. So what is he? I would consider him like a criminal.
Yeah, I'm thinking more like kind of like mafioso type, you know.
Well, I mean, his family did have links with the Pakistan ISI, so I mean, there's that too
There's
to
there.
consider. Yeah. So, but he did it. He did know about radical fundamentalist groups in Pakistan. So, like, he was very familiar with those groups. But swearing loyalty to Bin Laden, he didn't do that until 2000, 2001. But like in '99, the story goes that Muhammad, again, take this with a grain of salt. Um, um, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed goes to Osama bin Laden in 1999 and basically proposes this operation called the Plains Operation. And he tells him about this idea to hijack 10 planes and to crash them all inside the United States, all over. And bin Laden says, I'll think about it, too much. But later on, he has the second meeting in December of 99. And bin Laden says, he pitches the idea, and bin Laden likes it. He says, but we'll do it with 4. Remember what I said, just take that a grain of salt because it's coming from Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. He was tortured. He could have been telling the truth. Well, he could have been lying. We don't know. He was tortured. Anyway.
I don't know if I would believe him if he wasn't tortured.
I mean, but that's the whole idea. Right? We don't know for sure. See, instead of making a decision, a definitive decision of yes or no, we're left with we don't know. And that's the worst position to be in.
Right.
We don't know. We have no idea. So anyway, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed meets with members of the Hamburg cell, and he takes them to meet who? The military commander of Al Qaeda, Mohammed Atef, the second emir of Al Qaeda, Dr. Ayman al Zawahiri, and Osama bin Laden. So, in other words, there's no like gradual process of meeting the lower rungs of Al Qaeda. No, these guys, these nobodies, basically go and meet the top echelon, the power structure of Al Qaeda. And not only do they meet them, but they're told about being involved with the most important operation in the history of Al Qaeda, which is called the Plains Operation.
Right.
And they basically chose them and said they chose them because they're Western, they're educated, they're Western looking, they're educated, they speak some English, and so they could familiarize themselves inside the United States. So they tell them about this operation. And they tell them that if you want to become heroes for martyrdom for the Arab community, the Muslim community, against the demon United States, we'll give you a martyrdom operation that would, put the knees of the United States where they are on the ground. And according to, the narrative reported by the 9/11 Commission report and the FBI Pentagon report, as well as the statements made by captured Al Qaeda officials, that yeah, they agreed to it. Right. And so let's just go along with that storyline, right? For now, so they agreed to it. Now,
can I interrupt one more time because I do want to ask you? Have you ran into any evidence or any hint that bin Laden or Khalid Sheikh Mohammed or any of these guys that were involved with the CIA operations in Afghanistan from the 80s had a mole within the United States government?
God, that's a question and a half, huh? Wow.
Because there's a lot of what you're saying, and then I'm taking things that we haven't gotten to yet, right. And I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, the only way this makes sense is if they knew this stuff was going to happen.
Well, you don't have to go back that far to actually know what's going to happen, but according to
what I'm saying is like the only way for, like, let's say the coordinated attack on 9/11, it took place during an operation when they were testing, the defense of aeronautical attacks, right? And it took place during this, so it confused a lot of people as to what was going on. It's like, in order to time it that way, that doesn't seem like coincidence. It seems like they had this information. And where did they get this information?
Right. All right. I know where you're coming from. So okay, let me put it to you this way. The job of the intelligence services is to do what? Collect information. So they can access the information and act on it before the operation happens, right?
Mm,
So that's the job of all intelligence services,
right.
to collect information about dangerous individuals and access that information and to prevent terrorist operations from even happening. Now, if we are to speculate, and this is reasonable speculation, let's flip it. The intelligence services got wind of the planes operation. Let's just say they even heard about it through the Yemen hub, because the NSA, remember, the NSA was listening to the phone calls, right?
Right.
So they're listening to the phone calls of Mohammed Haydar Zamar, Marwan al-Shahid, people within Al Qaeda. Remember that they had a tap on Bin Laden's satellite phone. That satellite phone was used by Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, Mohammed Atef. Let's just say, for example, that somehow within these transcripts and these intelligence taps, that they got wind of a plot. It's called the planes operation, and that they use crude talk to talk about it. Crude, broken code. That you could break yourself and know what they're talking about.
Right.
So let's just say there was an element within, say, the NSA or the CIA that knew about this planes operation, and that foreign intelligence services got wind of this plot as well, because they're running their own operations. Now, whether they're in conjunction with the NSA CIA or they're doing it separately, either way, it doesn't matter. But let's just say they knew about it. And so that the heads of these operations basically said, it would benefit us to have these operations be successful. And so we can actually expound on the after effects of these operations for a greater geopolitical cause, because that's what this is all about. Because what happens after 9/11? Well, you got the Patriot Act, the North Defense Authorization Act, 2002, 2003. We went to war with Iraq. We went to war with Afghanistan. We later on went to war with Syria. We went to war with Libya. Big giant defense contracts for LG-3 technologies, Raytheon, Boeing, productions of missiles, bullets, pretty big money. We're talking trillions, not even billions, trillions of dollars. Afghanistan itself was $3 trillion. And I don't know how much Iraq was. I think it was like 1.2 trillion or whatever. The amounts are staggering. But you may say to yourself in a moral question, like, how can the United States basically do that? Allow 3,000 of those civilians to be killed? Well, to them, what does it matter? 3,000 people. They've killed millions of people in Iraq.
Well, the ends justifies the means.
Right. Exactly.
I was talking to somebody the other day, and I was like, you're looking at this from your morality. You can't look at it from your morality. You had what's her name come out after 500,000 Iraqis had died and said, we think the cost was worth it. Like,
exactly.
You're talking about starving children.
Madeleine Albright.
Yeah. And you're talking about starving children.
Right.
Like, do you think that cost was worth it? Because they do. Like, does that operate within your moral framework? Right. And so you got to kind of step outside of your moral framework. And that's why I'm asking you the questions I'm asking, because it's like, okay, like, I'm trying to step out and say, okay, like, how did all these guys end up at the same mosque? And then right. I'm like, then my next question is there any evidence that there might have been a mole? And so what I'm wondering is if there was somebody that was involved, with Afghanistan back in the 80s that kept these ties and was playing kind of double agent here and was kind of doing their thing from both sides. And I'm just wondering, are there any names that pop out that, that you're seeing this kind of like evidence kind of come out?
Okay. I'm actually was going to lead up to that when you said about the mole issue.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll let you go.
That's why I said we don't have to go far back, because what I'm going to use as speculation later on, that indeed there might have been a mole regarding the Hamburg and the planes operation. That's what I was going to allude to.
Yeah.
But I was going to say that for later.
Oh, okay. Well, we can get to it later. I'm just
okay.
my brain's working, you're talking, and I'm just like thinking like, all right, and that's what I'm over here scribbling. I'm like writing down questions. I'm like,
Right,
oh, what
right.
is this?
No, the questions are actually the questions are what exactly what I want to hear. But yeah, that question about the mole I'll get to in a minute because myself and Nelson Martin's DJ Thermal Detonator, we're working on a theory regarding that there may have been a mole inside the Hamburg cell, and I wanted to build a timeline showing the steps of what how this all makes sense. So that's
Well,
why
it makes a lot of sense. Also, it lets, because we talked like in the first episode about the compartmentalization of the CIA and these intelligence communities, the way they operate. And so like if you can visualize the way that these systems operate and say, okay, I'm unwilling to go out on a limb and say the entire United States intelligence services were involved in this plot. But is there a possibility that one person was involved and maybe a high ranking person, somebody with some influence, could have pulled some strings and made some moves in order to
sure,
make these things
sure.
easier for the attacks to be successful?
Yeah, exactly. And yes, what I think, like I said, take that with a grain of salt because it's speculation. That I do think there was a mole within the Hamburg cell that allowed for this mole to basically relay information to this foreign intelligence service, which basically gave them up to date details about the progress is being made for this plane's operation to be successful, all the way up until the day itself. Actually,
Mm.
but I'll get to that in a second. Actually,
The
so
9/11 Ray Epps.
yeah, exactly. Even and you know what? It's even worse than that, actually. So you'll understand how broad this operation may have been, actually. So they're in Afghanistan. They're told about the plane's operation. They agree, and then they go back to Germany. They go back to Al Quds, and they prepare themselves to basically now enter the United States to begin operations. Now, up until this point, like I said, Mohammed Atta, Marwan al Shehhi, Ramzi bin al Shib stay at this apartment called 54 Marienstraße in Germany, which is being watched by the CIA and German intelligence LFV. Ziad Jarrah continues to live on his own. He meets his girlfriend there, Azel Senguin, but he never lives with her. He actually stays alone. He lives in an apartment. He lives in a room with that woman I told you about. He basically just lives alone, stays alone, whatever. All right. 2000 comes along, and Marwan al Shehhi is the first to arrive inside the United States, and he goes to Florida. Then comes Muhammad Atta. He arrives in Florida as well in the summer of 2000. And then Ziad Jarrah. Ziad Jarrah enters Florida, actually enters New Jersey, then he goes to Florida and resides in Florida as well. Ramzi bin al Shib, however, couldn't get into the United States. Now, his application was actually denied when he applied for a U.S. tourist visa while in Germany. So he basically was going to be a pilot hijacker. Because he couldn't get inside the United States, he was actually designated as a facilitator between bin Laden and members of the Hamburg cell. So he would coordinate with all the members of the pilot hijacking team, as well as the muscle hijacking team that came much, much later. So these guys went to Florida flight schools. Muhammad Atta and Marwan al Shehhi basically lived in an apartment in Hollywood, Florida. And basically they lived with themselves. They went to aviation school, Huffman Aviation, which was owned by Rudy Deckers. And basically, this had a long history of very shady practices with the CIA, drug running. Daniel Hopsicker wrote a fantastic book called something called The Venice Flying Circus. It's an awesome book. It's hard to get now on Amazon, but it actually details about this drug running operation that began in the 80s regarding Huffman Aviation that was used by the CIA to conduct drug running operations.
Is this was this what Barry Seal was involved in?
No, it was different, but
okay,
it was,
okay,
it was
like going into
similar.
Mena, Arkansas, and shit like
yeah,
that.
similar. It was similar to it,
Okay.
but there was a lot of shady stuff going on there. But nevertheless, Ziad Jarrah he went to a different flight school. I think it was called Florida Air Traffic School or something like that, Florida Flight School, something like that. And guess what? He lived alone, didn't live with any of the others. And basically, these guys, Mohammed Atta, Maulana Shehi, they got their instrument ratings in December of 2000. Ziad Jarrah got his instrument and commercial pilot's rating license in 2000 as well. I think he was the first, and then Mohammed Atta and Maulana Shehi got theirs in December of 2000. So then, at about this time, Mohammed Al Shehi and Zia and Mohammed Atta, they basically were seen together in different states. They talked about a crop duster in Oklahoma. They actually went to a flight school in Oklahoma that, incidentally enough, was the same flight school that was used by the alleged 20th hijacker, Zacharias Moussaoui, in 2001. There was no direct correlation there, allegedly. I don't know, I'll leave it up to you, the listener. But yeah, they went to like different flight schools. They trained on simulators and whatnot. Ziad Jarrah basically moved around himself, and basically, he allowed for his girlfriend to come to the United States because he felt lonely. And Mohammed Atta was against this. He heard about Ziad Jarrah wanting to travel to Germany to see his girlfriend. He forbade it because he thought that it would compromise the situation. And actually, one time, Ziad Jarrah actually was stopped by authorities at the United Arab Emirates, and he was traveling on a very doctored passport that was made in Afghanistan, which is basically a haven for terrorists. And so a lot of countries basically know that these young men that travel from Afghanistan to neighboring countries, they know where they're coming from, these training camps. So they looked at Ziad Jarrah's passport, they saw he had a long beard, and in his possessions basically were like terrorist manuals. In other words, screaming terrorist. This guy, hey, this guy's a terrorist. So they say that he's coming to the United States. So the United Arab Emirates, I think it's the United Arab Emirates. I think it's them. So forgive me if it's the wrong country, but they called the CIA and they say, hey, listen, this guy, Ziad Jarrah, is basically coming to the United States. He's on a documented Al Qaeda passport from Afghanistan. He's got these incriminating documents in his, suitcase. Do you want me to hold him? Do you want me to, hold him here, or do you want to question him? And they said no, let him through. And so they did. He walked through, entered the United States. So that's one red flag. You're like, what the hell does that mean? That doesn't make sense. So anyway, he comes to the United States and stuff, and travels to and fro without any interaction or interference from any intelligence services. Same thing happened with Khalid al-Mihdhar when he left for Yemen to visit his pregnant wife. He was not put on a terrorist watch list. Meanwhile, here's a verified Al Qaeda operative, and he wasn't on a terrorist watch list. It wasn't until his return to the United States that the CIA said, let's put him on a terrorist watch list. Wow. You would think that they would have done that years prior, but no, now that he's inside the United States, he's on a terrorist watch list. So, but by then it's a little bit too late, wouldn't you think? So, meanwhile, while they were inside the United States, Mohammed Atta, Mohammed Al Shehi, Ziad Jarrah, while they were living in Florida, what the media won't tell you, what the State Department won't tell you, but through verified independent reports like Gerald Shea, who's a lawyer out of San Ispo, California, he wrote the Gerald Shea memo, in which Israeli art student rings that were operating all throughout the Northeast and Southwest, monitoring who? Hamas, Hezbollah, and Al Qaeda. So they were monitoring these people, even in Florida. Robbie Martin on Media Roots Radio did a fantastic expose. It's one of the best podcasts talking about this Israeli intelligence front that was operating in Florida and New Jersey and New York and Texas, all throughout the Southwest and Northeast. And the Gerald Shea memo talks about this in full and actually names names about who was arrested by the authorities regarding these operations. And it just so happened that these art student rings and moving companies that were, hiring these Israeli students all throughout the years of 2001, 2000, that they just so happened to be living close by to members of the Hamburg cell. So, like, for example, one of the dancing Israelis that was caught later on after 9/11, his name was um, Omar Mabry. He had a license, a driver's license, regarding a residence in Hollywood, Florida. So what the hell is that guy doing in New York when he had a residence in Hollywood, Florida? Well, he was involved with the moving companies that were involved with monitoring these people. Now, what did they collect? What did they know? We don't know because pressure from the State Department, and this is not shocking at all, that a lot of these people that were arrested by the FBI and Department of Homeland Security after 9/11, all these Israelis that were basically detained and involved with these massive operations, they were all deported, every last one of them, because the first law that they broke wasn't a federal law; it was an immigration law because they all they all had over expired visas. Now, I happen to think that that was on purpose because as long as you have an expired visa, you're no longer a federal, you're a foreign entity. So you can't be held by the FBI if you're suspected of a crime inside the United States. But because you're a foreign entity and you're not a foreign and you're not an American a citizen, you're a foreign national. Well, the first crime you committed was an immigration crime and you're deported. And I don't see Israeli basically uh,
Was there
bringing back these people to begin investigations into the background.
was there visas actually expired or did they overstay? Because like there's a
No,
difference.
they a lot of these expired. A lot of them overstayed, but a lot of them were expired. But they did it on purpose.
That's
So
incredible.
yeah, all of them, all of them.
Well,
In fact,
because a visa, just I only know this because Beatrix moved here from South Africa. The
right.
visa is good for 10 years. So
these these are student visas that only lasted 6 months.
oh, okay. Well, see, that's what they tell you. Like when, all right. So the way it worked, like with her visa, is she got a 10-year visa, but she's only allowed to be here for 6 months at a time. So she would be able to come here for 6 months. It would be marked on her passport when she arrived. She's supposed to leave within 6 months of that time. That's why I'm asking, did the visas actually expire? Did they just overstay? Like, because those are two different things from my experience. Now, this might be some other sort of visa program that they were going through. That's very possible. I don't know everything about immigration, but all I'm saying is that she got her visa was good for 10 years, but she was only allowed to come for 6 months at a time. Right. And so after that 6 months, she had to fly out, she had to leave, and then she could come back and be here for another 6 months. But if she left, like, let's say she left 6 months and a week later, right? So she overstayed her visa by a week, then she would not be allowed to come back in. She'd have to reapply for another visa. So that would like defraud her visa. And that's what I'm asking. I'm wondering if that it was some situation like that.
Right. So the visas that these guys took were student visas, and there's a difference. Is with student visa, it's anywhere between 3 to 6 months, and then
Okay.
you have to go reapply. But
Gotcha.
one thing you can't do on a student visa is basically get a job. So there's a different visa for that. I think it was called like an A110 or something like that.
Right.
You have to say, hey, I'm working for a company, because you have to pay taxes on the money that you get.
Right.
So in other words, they didn't inform their on their visa application that they got jobs. So with, like, for example, Urban Moving Systems, which everybody knows by now, was the moving company that the dancing Israelis came from. Well, they in the year 1999, 2000, they put out flyers for Israelis that were coming inside the United States that were here on temp visas to work with them because they pay under the books. I work for moving companies, and sometimes they do this. They'll
Right.
pay you under the books for the employment, so they don't have to pay tax dollars on it,
Mhm.
right? So they basically work for these people, but at the same time, these guys are not on record, so you don't have a background of these people. That's another added plus for these people. They could just disappear and without any record whatsoever. So because they violated the order of a student visa, either they expired or they didn't, reapply. The first thing that the FBI has to do is hand them to INS because that's the first law they broke.
Gotcha.
and the punishment is deportation.
Gotcha.
So they, in other words, like with the dancing Israelis, not to get myself over ahead here to go back to Hamburg. So with the dancing Israelis, they were under they were detained by the FBI for 71 days, but then they got pressured by two unnamed senators, and with Alan Dershowitz acting as a mediator to basically pressure their release. The FBI didn't want to because they said, "Hey, these guys know something, right?
Yeah.
And we think they know something more, right?" And it even says so in the FBI redacted report. There's a page and a half redacted where the FBI basically says what was the reason for holding them. Well, it basically says, "Well, we don't think they're involved." Well, that's not going to take a page and a half of redaction to say it. I think they knew much more than what they were implying, right?
Yeah, and I actually think that subject in and of itself is worth a full hour. Like we're gonna really, I'd really
Yeah,
like
that's
to,
a huge. Yeah, that's.
I'd really like to get into that because there's a lot of things I've heard that I'm not certain about all the details of, so I'd like to get into that. But
Yeah, I mean that's fine too. Yeah, in fact, one of the longest articles I ever wrote was basically talking about the FBI redaction report, and I put it in chronological order and added some information along with it regarding urban moving systems.
yeah,
Yeah, but getting back to intelligence, like these guys.
sorry, people.
Oh no, it
No,
basically has to make sense.
I'm apologizing to the listeners. Like, I'm sorry, we're kind of doing our own thing here.
Yeah. So yeah, like what I want to show is that yeah, there was intelligence, foreign and domestic, that were very closely situated with members of the Hamburg cell and people out west like Khalid al-Badr and Al-Fazmi. So it wasn't like they didn't have a handle. Like these guys were stepping every step of the way, watching these people go and go and go,
Yeah,
monitoring these people. All right. So 2001 happens. Right? Now these guys, the muscle hijackers started coming in. And a lot of these guys are from like the rural areas of Saudi Arabia. And they basically, all they had to do was basically be the muscle hijackers, train in like at the gym, prepare themselves. Now, here's the thing. Did they know it was a martyrdom operation? Did they know they were going to die on it? I can't give you a yes or no answer because even though that there are martyrdom will videos of these muscle hijackers, and I posted 9 of them on Odyssey. They don't mention the planes operation. Now, As Sahab Media, which is the Al Qaeda media arm, basically shot these videos. So they are authentic. These are real authentic videos. Now, they are martyrdom videos because they do talk about dying for the cause, but they don't mention the planes operation. That's what makes me think. I'm like, I don't know. Now, did they know about the planes operation? Yes, they did. Did they think it was a hijack? I probably think that they did think that. I'm not, like I said, I can't give you a definitive answer. I hate doing that. Like, I always like to try and inform my listeners and audience about information. And like, I hate being held in a state of like, disbelief or belief because you don't know where to turn, what's right and wrong and what's not. But I don't know. I couldn't tell you. But one thing is for certain, that these guys were the muscle hijacking part of the planes operation, and they need to know very little, right? So they come inside the United States. Now here's
can you explain what their role was and what makes them like a separate entity?
Well, it's simple that all they needed to be involved was to make sure that the passengers of these planes that were being hijacked would not revolt and get into the pilot, and take over the plane. These guys basically had to kill somebody, and they used a box cutter. Now, I have to talk about this for a little bit because I hear this from like the fringe community of the truth movement. Oh, a box cutter, you can't fight. Like how could you be afraid of a box cutter? The reason why they chose a box cutter was this: if you've never been cut by a box cutter, and I have, because I worked in a place called Seatown here in New York. It was a food market. One time I cut my whole thumb. You can't see it, but my thumb. I actually was cutting a box with just a blade.
That's what I carry instead of a knife.
Yeah. Let me tell you something. I'm more afraid of a box cutter than I am of a knife, because a box cutter, you can actually cut yourself. What I did was I cut a box and I cut right through my thumb, and it didn't hurt. All of a sudden, my thumb blew up and the hole became so wide that blood was gushing everywhere. I cut right almost down to the bone, and it didn't even hurt.
Right.
But I'm bleeding profusely. I'm wrapping up my hand like, oh, damn it. Right. They use a box cutter because, for one, as soon as you slash somebody's throat with that, the first thing they're going to see is blood splatter everywhere. As soon as everyone sees that, and then you see that, you're not going to be able to do a damn thing, because the first thing that enters your mind is a state of shock.
Mm-hmm.
Right? These people like are just regular passengers. They don't know any better, and they see that, and they're basically, like, immobilized in fear.
Right.
And that's exactly why they chose the box cut. Right? Also, there were reports of knives on these planes, and even reports of a gun. I'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, the muscle hijacking team are to make sure that these guys go on these planes, 4 or 5 of them at a pair, hold back the passengers, make sure that they're in the back, nobody fights back and whatnot, and keep the pilot hijacking team from being interfered with their plans to crash the plane wherever they want to crash. That's all. So they're on a very need to know basis. And all they need to know was that keep the passengers at bay. Like I said, did they think it was a maritime operation? I don't know. It's like, I don't know. Couldn't tell you. Anyway, they started coming inside the United States in 2001. But the thing is this, Tommy, is that a lot of these applications went through the Jeddah U.S. Consular Office. And one of the employees there was a person by the name of Shayna Steiger. And according to her, because she was interviewed by the FBI, she said in the summer of 2001, a lot of these applications that started coming in from the Saudis, some of these applications were incomplete. In other words, the muscle hijacking team of 9/11, a lot of these, all of their applications, all of them were incomplete. Some of them couldn't answer where they were going. Some of them couldn't answer who they were meeting. Some of them couldn't answer how much money they had. Some of them couldn't answer when they were coming back to the state, to the country of origin. And basically, in the rules of immigration, if a person viewing this application sees it as either mysterious or nefarious, they're to hold another session, which is a face-to-face meet session with the applicant. Well, according to Shayna Steiger, she was pressured by the State Department to allow all these applications to be approved under the Visa Express program. Now, for those who don't know about the Visa Express program, this was a program that was constituted by the United States Immigration Naturalization Services because they wanted to repair relations with Saudi Arabia. And because they have a lot of students here in the United States, especially in states like Oklahoma, where they go and study oil engineering at the University of Oklahoma, University of Oklahoma State. They go there, Texas, Arkansas, right? So they said, you know what? We'll just pass all these applications through. And some of these applications weren't even approved for the Visa Express program, which makes you wonder, like, wow, none of these applications. So in other words, Shayna Steiger never had a muscle hijacker's applicant meet a face-to-face. Not one. So in other words, if you're to believe that the muscle hijackers didn't even put their applications in the mailbox of the, say the immigration services because they had to mail it, well, it didn't have to even be them. It could have been somebody else for that matter. We don't know. What we do know is that these guys basically did come inside the United States. They were given their visas at the consulate office in Jeddah. They were approved, and they did come inside the United States.
And this was the book you and I were talking about last week, or the last episode, Passports for Al Qaeda.
Right, exactly. J. Michael Springman.
Right.
And that goes back even further to Operation Cyclone.
Yeah.
Operation.
This was going on for a long time. It kind of became just the way they operated there at the Jeddah office. And so when these guys came through, it was nothing new. It was like, all right, yeah,
No.
we've been doing this for 30 years. We're just going to keep doing it. It wasn't some big shocker. So it doesn't mean that, these people were in on it. It just means that there was this kind of lax program that the bureaucracy that wants to, clamp down on your neck, but they're going to, give exceptions to specific people based upon identity and yada, yada, yada. We hear all these catchphrases nowadays all the time. So it was this kind of, what would you call it? It was kind of like their version of redress, a redress of grievances, I guess.
Right. Yes, and to show you that when Shayna Steiger basically said that the reason why she approved these applications was that she was so overwhelmed that she actually was one of maybe two people that basically was working at the consulate. They were overloaded with applications.
Mm,
So she basically told the FBI in 2002 that, yeah, she approved these applications because she was being pressured by her superiors about letting these applicants go through. And it just so happened that the applicants that go through, some of these were bad applicants, but
yeah.
because they didn't do any stricter security measures, they just allowed anybody in. So in
Mhm.
other words, it's like this air of plausible deniability, if you will,
Yeah.
because you really can't say that, oh, she knew about these people, they were bad. Well, she really didn't, because she didn't do any she didn't do any stricter security backgrounds on these people, because they were just allowed to come in.
Right.
Just like with J. Michael Springman in the 1980s, it just allowed to, and that was the CIA that basically
Right.
told them just let them in.
Just let them in.
And yeah, just let them
Well,
in.
it'd be like blaming the border patrol for MS-13 getting into the
Yeah,
border.
right,
It's the same type of deal. It's kind of like, no, it's just this revolving door, and just the way it works. And like, they're the bureaucratic system acts very slowly to correct any of these wrongs. So it would definitely not, it's not her fault. It was just the policy. It was the way it
right,
was, and she was just there to operate on the policy, just like a border patrol agent is on the border operating by whatever policy is laid out before them.
right.
It's no different.
No, it's no different. And then also, by allowing all these people to come in, you know, they're hoping at the same time that like all these radical fundamentals will come in and basically they'll commit a terrorist action, and then they can like expound on that and take advantage of it. And basically, what is always the after effects of a terrorist operation? Well, the overreaction. That's right.
Mm,
As
mhm.
Saul Alinsky once said, that the real action is in the reaction, right?
Yeah.
So basically, you get these people that the muscle hijackers that come inside the United States in 2001, and they're basically now familiarizing themselves with members of the Hamburg cell. However, while this is going on, Ziad Jarrah still at this point, even while he was living in Florida and Maryland, he's living alone. Never lives with even members of the muscle hijacking team. All right. So fast forward to the weeks prior to 9/11. You know what? I'll even go just days before 9/11, just days before 9/11, right? So Ziad Jarrah actually travels from Florida to New Jersey. He rents a room at the Days Inn Motel in Newark, which is right near Newark International Airport. And what's funny about this story is that, you may seem like, what's the big deal about this? Okay. Ziad Jarrah actually rents a room for himself. He then rents a room for the muscle hijacking team, and they are Mustafa Al Hassawi, Ahmed Al Nami, and Saeed Al Ghamdi. Those are the muscle hijackers for Flight 93. Now, you have to wonder to yourself, why would he do that? Why would he rent a room for himself? And why would he rent a room for the muscle hijackers? Wouldn't you want to like live amongst them? And he did this 2 days, September 9th. So you figure like, why would he just like be in the same room with them and get familiar with them? Because you want to be every step of the way, making sure this operation goes, to plan, right? But
Mhm.
no, right? So Mohammed Atta, Marwan al Shehi, they go to Washington, D.C., and then New York, and like they rent the room. The muscle hijackers, they get familiar with them regarding their separate plane operations. And so September 11th, 2001 happens. No, I'm sorry. Let me back up. September 10th, 2001. This is huge. That's the reason why I can't negate this. In Dulles Airport, which is Washington, D.C., where Flight 77 departs, on September 10th in the early evening, there's an Argon Bright Security is actually doing security in the airport. There's a security guard by the name of Eric Gill, and he's actually situated between the security entrance checkpoint and the tarmac where the planes are being prepped for the next day. He says, now this is according to him, he says he saw 6 men, 3 dressed as airline employees and 3 dressed, in regular clothes. But the ones that were dressed as airline employees, they had like these filthy clothes on, like they came out of a hamper, right? So they had the necessary credentials to go through a security checkpoint. And now they were heading toward him with the security checkpoint that leads to the tarmac. So Eric Gill notices that they don't have the necessary credentials to get into that because you have different credentials for that. And they basically tell him, he says to help you because they're actually now looking around, looking at other ways to get in. So he goes, hey, can I help you? He thought that to be odd. And he says, yeah, we need to get in there. And he says, all right, do you have to pass? He goes, no. He goes, well, I can't let you in. So they start cursing at him. One guy said that, we're very fucking important people in broken English. He goes, you got to let us. And after hemming and hawing, knowing that they couldn't get in, they walked out. They walked away. Eric Gill says, I don't know what happened after that. And he's later interviewed. He tells him that his shift ended, but when his shift ends, nobody replaces him to guard the door. Now, the only way you can get into that door is having the credentials to get into that door, and it opens up. But there's no guard at the door. So I'm going to get back to that in a minute. Also on September 10th, Ziad Jarrah from his hotel room writes a letter to his girlfriend, Azel Singweed. And he writes a very long encrypted letter. It basically says that he'll see her in time. That paradise awaits us. You'll understand why I'm doing this. It won't be understood by you now, but one day we will meet again. And you would think that this being his last letter to the most important person of his life outside of his family, that everything in that letter would go like nothing would be wrong with it. But what happens? He writes the wrong address. Later on, after 9/11, the FBI, because it was the wrong address, it's returned to sender. It goes back to the hotel room. But the problem is that the FBI intercepted the letter because they're doing investigation into September 11, 2001. And they got a hold of the letter. I'll get that in a minute again. September 11, 2001. Ziad Jarrah leaves his room with the muscle hijacking team. Now, according to the FBI, Ziad Jarrah makes a phone call to his girlfriend who's getting her tonsils taken out. So she really couldn't talk. But she later tells German investigators after 9/11 that the only words he said to her was, I love you, I love you, I love you. And then he hangs up. The FBI states that they don't know whether that phone call took place in the hotel room or in the airport. Does that make any sense to you?
Mm-mm.
Why couldn't they know where that call originated from? But that's what they wrote. And the 9/11 Commission report in their footnotes actually state that they don't know where that call originated. It seems strange to me. Anyway, Ziad Jarrah does get his boarding pass. It is clipped, and they go down the tarmac. The muscle hijacking team, they go through security screening. Their boarding passes are recorded. And later on, the FBI actually interviews people working at the airport saying that they did see these people. They get on the plane, whatever, right? Mohammed Atta, he gets on his plane. Mohammed al-Sheikh gets on his plane. Now, I got to bring this up too, because this is important. Also on September 10th, Mohammed Atta and one of the muscle hijackers of Flight 11, Abdulaziz Al Amari, travel from Florida all the way to Boston, and then from Boston to Portland. Now, this is a killer for me. Why did Mohammed Atta and Abdulaziz Al Amari go to Portland? That's really big. According to the 9/11 Commission report, they said so that because they don't want to bring attention to authorities that a bunch of Arabs are getting on these planes. Just go in separately. Nobody's really thinking about terrorism at that point, right? Nobody knows nothing about Arab fundamentalist terrorism. So that didn't jive with me. But later on, it was found out that when they went to Portland, they stood at a hotel, and that they got a connecting flight from, I think, Delta Airlines to Logan Airport, Boston. And one of the ticket agents, his name is Michael Tuhey. He basically looked at Mohammed Atta and he saw like Mohammed Atta was like, I don't need a boarding pass, do I? He goes, yes, you got to have a boarding pass to connect the flight. He was pissed. And he said, Tuhey said, like he had these serious eyes and I'll never forget his face. And basically he gave him his boarding pass. He goes, you're cutting it close. You're about 5-10 minutes late for your flight if you don't get on now. And so they basically almost missed their flight at Flight 11 by connecting on this connecting flight from Portland to Boston. Like it doesn't make sense why they went to Portland. Now, me and Nelson Martins are working on a theory that the reason why they went to Portland was to meet with other affiliates who are going to hijack additional airlines. Now, that isn't false because we do find out there were additional airlines that were going to be hijacked.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, CNN did a report, and I could provide that report that they found box cutters taped on the backs of food trays and other planes in LaGuardia at JFK. Even on September 13th, when they lifted the flight ban, there was over 55 people that were arrested. One dressed as a pilot trying to get on the plane, who was a relative of Bin Laden family. Surreal. Like, but who are these people? Were they Al Qaeda? Were they groups? We don't know.
They were the other 6 planes.
Right. We don't know. We don't know who these people are. Anyway, they travel from Boston. They travel from Portland down to Boston Logan. They barely meet. They barely get on Flight 11. It was like 5-10 minute window. They almost missed it. Biggest operation. So in other words, whatever they did in Portland was really important enough to basically almost miss their flight.
Right.
They wouldn't have gone there for nothing.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I think. Anyway, September 11th, they all get on the plane. Now, according to the FBI, Mohammed al-Sheikh makes a phone call to Mohammed Atta, a cell phone. They don't know the contents of the phone, what they were saying, but they think that he's contacting Atta, hey, are you on your plane? And we're on our plane. Smooth ride, right? Whatever. Now, Flight 11 hijacked, crashes into the North Tower. Flight 175 hijacked, almost crashes into 2 planes, by the way, on their way to the South Tower, and they almost missed the building.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever watch it, it's on a bank, and it hits the corner of the South Tower. Almost missed it,
right,
like a few feet. Flight 77, they're hijacked, crashed into the Pentagon. Flight 93 hijacked, it crashes in Shanksville. And you think that's the end of the story? Well, Tommy, it's only the beginning, because now what I'm going to impart with you is the anomalies of 9/11, which are hidden by the State Department, the FBI, and by the kooky, fringe conspiracies. So, for example,
well, you want to do that?
7.
You want to do that on the next episode? The
We
anomalies?
could, if you want.
Because we're at
So,
it's
well,
9:30 now, so like it's been
okay,
an hour and a half.
okay, sure enough, yeah.
I think that's good.
We'll keep your audience
Keep them
hanging
on the
for
edge
another
of their
couple
seat.
days. Yeah,
Yeah.
because
I still
in
haven't
the
even
next
released.
episode,
I'm releasing part 2 tomorrow. Like I haven't even released part
okay.
2 yet.
So it's funny is guys in the next episode, I'm going to lay the hammer down about the mole operation, which will show a much way bigger conspiracy than what we're led to believe.
Awesome. Yes.
Yeah,
Yep. So yeah, let's do that for the next episode.
you got it.
Because we're an hour and a half in, and I'm like, this is a lot of information, man.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Every time I listen to you, I'm like, man, geez, I gotta read some about this.
No, it's understandable. Yeah, we'll get into that next episode.
Awesome, man. All right. Well, I'm gonna stop the recording.